After years of being told I was too unstable to live alone, I moved into a small apartment to prove them wrong. At first, it was hard. Loneliness hit me harder than I expected, and I could still hear their doubts in my head. But I focused on rebuilding myself, step by step. I started a business, slowly turned a profit, and reinvested wisely. One day, I saw that the houses on my old street were going up for sale. Without telling anyone, I bought each one. Now, my name is on every deed in the neighborhood they said I couldn't handle. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. The last words my mother said to me before they took away my keys were, "You're not safe alone. It's for your own good." But what she really meant was, "We don't trust you anymore." It wasn't a conversation. It was a verdict. I stood there in my own living room, the smell of lemon polish still fresh on the table I had cleaned earlier, as my brother slid the house keys out of my hand. Like I was a child. Like I didn't notice how their eyes avoided mine, how they'd already packed up half my things in cardboard boxes before even telling me what was happening. They'd made the decision behind my back. My mother, my brother, and my sister-in-law, while I was recovering from the episode. That's what they called it. An episode. One bad week. One week where I didn't return calls, didn't go to work, didn't eat. One week where grief swallowed me whole and left me gasping. But they made it seem like it was the end of my life, not a chapter of it. "You need to be somewhere with supervision," my brother said. "It's not permanent. Just until you stabilize." I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I didn't do either. I just nodded. It felt like something broke in me that day. Like the last thread of belief that I was part of them snapped clean in half. No matter what they said, I knew what it meant. They didn't believe in me anymore. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. And worse, maybe they wanted me to be. They moved me into a tiny guest room at my brother's place. My old room, actually, the one I used to sleep in during the holidays. Except now it had a lock on the outside and a pill tray on the nightstand. The first night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had gotten here. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Just 2 months ago, I was living independently in the house I'd bought myself, holding down a career I'd built from scratch, surrounded by family who smiled at me and called me brave for everything I'd survived. I wasn't always the fragile one. In fact, I was the strong one. The one they leaned on when Dad died. The one who stayed up late filling out insurance forms for Mom when she got sick. The one who helped my brother pay for law school when he and his wife were struggling with their mortgage. I was the one who gave up everything. Marriage, kids, even vacations, to be there for them. I loved them. I gave everything to them. And now, they treated me like a liability. Like a problem to be managed. The morning after I moved in with them, I tried to keep the peace. I smiled through breakfast, thanked them for the toast and eggs, took my medication without complaint. I played the part of someone who needed help. I even offered to help with laundry and dishes. But they didn't want help. They wanted compliance. I could see it in their eyes. Every time I offered an opinion, every time I said, "I'm feeling okay today," there was a silent exchange between my brother and his wife. A flicker of concern masked as care. They were watching me. Waiting for me to break again. It wasn't a home. It was a test. And I failed every day simply by being myself. 3 weeks in, I heard them whispering in the kitchen late one night. I was supposed to be asleep, but the sound of clinking dishes and muffled voices pulled me out of bed. I stood by the stairs, just out of view. "She's still not stable," my sister-in-law said. "I don't think she's ready to live alone again. What if she forgets to eat again? Or skips meds? She can't go back to that house. It's too big. Too much space to spiral. We could rent it out," she added. "Or sell. Honestly, it would help us out a lot with the kids' tuition." That's when I realized it wasn't just about my well-being. It was about money. It was about control. My house, the one I bought on my own, the one I furnished piece by piece with my own paycheck. They were already talking about selling it. Without me. I stood there frozen, the walls around me suddenly unfamiliar and cold. That house wasn't just 4 walls. It was proof that I had survived. Proof that I could build something after the divorce, after the diagnosis, after everything. It was my sanctuary. And they wanted to take it. The next day, I asked my brother directly, "Are you planning to sell my house?" He looked caught off guard, but only for a second. "We're just trying to figure out what's best for you," he said smoothly. "You haven't been in a good place lately. The stress of managing a property alone." "It's not your decision," I said quietly. "Legally, it's in a trust," he replied. "After the guardianship was approved, we had to protect your assets." Guardianship. They'd filed for guardianship without even telling me. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I wasn't just a guest in this house. I was a prisoner. They had control of everything. My home, my money, my medical decisions. All based on a court petition I never even saw. The betrayal hit like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't concern. This was a takeover. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling again. But this time, I didn't feel broken. I felt fire. I remembered something I hadn't told anyone. Not my mother, not my brother, not even my therapist. Something I'd done 2 years ago, quietly, when I was still rebuilding after my divorce. Back when I still believed I needed to protect myself from life falling apart again. I had moved my savings, every dime not tied up in a house or trust, into a private offshore account under an LLC. And with it, I had purchased something unexpected. 2 small residential properties in the same neighborhood. Fixer-uppers I planned to flip or rent someday. And I hadn't stopped there. Every time I got a bonus, every time I picked up freelance work, I put it in that LLC. Not because I didn't trust my family, but because I needed something that was mine. Something untouchable. And now, it was my lifeline. They thought they'd taken everything from me. But they didn't know the truth. I still had power. And I was going to use it. I waited. Not because I was scared, but because timing was everything. If I acted too quickly, they'd know I wasn't as powerless as they believed. And if I showed my hand too early, they might tighten the guardianship, or worse, cut me off completely. So I played along. Quiet. Obedient. Fragile. Let them believe I was drifting, comforted by their concern and soothed by their presence. Each day, I listened. I observed. I gathered their plans like scattered puzzle pieces. They were confident. Too confident. They thought I was fading. But I wasn't fading. I was building. Every night, after pretending to go to sleep in the guest room, my brother's guest room, the one they locked from the outside, just in case, I'd pull out my old laptop. The one no one thought worked anymore. It was dusty, slow, and covered in scratches, but it still held everything I needed. From there, I accessed my private cloud drive, untouched, unnoticed, and completely separate from the assets in the guardianship trust. Inside were the documents they didn't know existed. The records of my LLC, bank statements from my offshore account, property deeds, transaction logs, and contractor correspondence. I had been quietly investing long before they decided to take over my life. 2 residential properties, both in my old neighborhood. Fixer-uppers I had planned to flip when the time was right. That time was now. The first step was simple. Expansion. I contacted Darren, a real estate agent I'd worked with before. He didn't know much about me, only that I preferred discretion and paid in full. "Darren," I said, "I want to buy more property." "How much more?" he asked. "As much as I can get on my old street." He paused for a beat. "Funny you say that. 3 homes just went up for sale over there." "Perfect," I replied. "Put in offers. Cash. Keep it quiet." He didn't need to be told twice. Darren valued confidentiality almost as much as his commission. By the end of that week, I had offers pending on 3 homes. One directly across the street from my old house. My neighborhood, the one they tried to cut me off from, was becoming mine, house by house. Still, I said nothing. I kept playing my role. I let them take me to therapy sessions and group appointments. I nodded politely. I took the pills they handed me. I said things like, "I'm grateful for your help," and "I don't know where I'd be without you." All while financing my return from the shadows. They thought I was fragile. But I was patient. And patience is power. Then came the overheard conversation that changed everything. It was late. My brother thought I was asleep. I stood just outside the kitchen, hidden in the dark. "She's showing signs of improvement," his wife whispered. "What if she wants to go back to the house?" "We can't let that happen," my brother said. "She'll spiral again. We've already listed it as a future asset for the kids' college fund." A future asset. My home, my one safe place, was now a bullet point in their financial planning. That was it. The final crack in the illusion. It wasn't about protecting me. It was about control. And convenience. I went back to my room and called Stephanie. Stephanie was a lawyer I had helped during her divorce years ago. I had lent her money, helped her file paperwork, connected her to an accountant. She owed me a favor, and more importantly, she believed in me. I told her everything. The guardianship, the trust, the deception, the silence I'd been forced to live in. "You don't just need a lawyer," she said. "You need a judge who isn't in your brother's pocket." "I've got one. Now I need you to draw up the motion." She asked, "Are you ready to go nuclear?" "They declared me incompetent," I said. "Now it's time I show them just how wrong they were." Stephanie moved fast. Within 10 days, we filed a motion to challenge the guardianship on the grounds of regained capacity. I'd arranged independent evaluations on my own, 2 of them. Both psychiatrists declared me mentally fit, clear-minded, and capable of managing my own affairs. We filed an emergency review motion based on financial control and potential exploitation. We didn't accuse my family outright. We didn't need to. The paperwork spoke for itself. The next evening, my brother came into my room, gripping the court papers. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. "You know exactly what it is," I replied calmly. "You're challenging the guardianship." "I'm taking my life back." His eyes widened with something between anger and fear. "After everything we've done for you?" I stood. "You did it for yourselves. You took my keys. My decisions. You moved to sell my house behind my back. That's not protection. That's theft." His face flushed, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I finalized the purchases. 7 homes, all within a 5-block radius, all surrounding the house I once owned. By the day of the court hearing, I owned half the street. When I walked into court that morning, I wore simple black slacks, a clean blouse, and the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. My mother sat across from me in the gallery, quiet and pale. My brother and his wife sat at the table with their lawyer, leafing nervously through documents. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and no tolerance for games, spoke first. "You claim she's incapable of managing her own affairs," she said to my brother, "but I see evidence of a different story. Multiple real estate investments, an LLC, 2 independent psychiatric evaluations confirming full capacity." She turned to their lawyer. "Have your clients been transparent about how they've managed her financial trust?" Their lawyer hesitated. "There have been some expenditures for care, but all justified." The judge interrupted. "She arranged her own care. Paid out of pocket for her therapists. Your filings show charges for private tutors for your children, a landscaping bill, and travel expenses. Were these directly related to her needs?" My brother looked like he wanted to vanish. The judge didn't need more time. She declared the guardianship terminated. My rights were fully restored. My trust and finances were returned to me. I walked out of the courthouse that day with my spine straight, head high, and full control of my life restored. I didn't return to my brother's house. I went straight to mine. The keys were cold in my hand as I stood in front of my front door again. The sun was setting. The porch light turned on automatically. Across the street, my brother was standing outside, frozen, watching. He didn't know yet. He didn't know that I'd bought the white cottage 2 doors down from his. Or the house next to that. Or the duplex behind his backyard. Or the little brick ranch that used to belong to the Johnsons, which now had a renovation coming soon sign on the lawn, under my LLC's name. He didn't know. But he would. And soon, everyone in the neighborhood would realize the truth. They didn't just lose control of me. They were now surrounded by me. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and smiled for the first time in months. The air inside my house was still. Not quiet. Still. As if the rooms had been holding their breath, waiting for me to return. The familiar creak in the floor by the kitchen door greeted me like an old friend. The couch I had picked out during a clearance sale still sat where I left it, wrapped in a thin veil of dust. A blanket lay folded at the end, untouched. Untouched like everything else they'd taken from me. It was all here. Frozen in time. Waiting. I stood in the entryway with the front door still open behind me, listening to the faint murmur of wind brushing through the trees outside. Across the street, I could feel their eyes. My brother. My sister-in-law. Probably my mother, watching from their living room window. Watching me walk back into a life they'd tried to erase. They couldn't stop staring. Because they were confused. They thought I'd be angry. Unhinged. Screaming. They thought I'd come home broken. Or not at all. Instead, I came back with deeds. Ownership papers. Lawyers. And power. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up in my living room, not because I was anxious, but because I was planning. The way a chess player plans their last 3 moves with a calm, unshakable stare. I sat with my laptop open on the coffee table, the quiet hum of power returning to the space around me. I made calls. Sent emails. Booked appointments with contractors for the new properties I had acquired. I filed permits for construction and renovation under the LLC name. I reviewed my renovation plans, budget allocations, and projected resale values for each house. I wasn't just taking back what was mine. I was building something new, bigger, stronger, permanent. By the end of the following week, construction trucks started arriving. It began with the duplex 2 doors down from my brother's house. Fencing went up. The roof was torn off. Contractors in hard hats walked up and down the block with clipboards and paint samples. A few neighbors poked their heads out curiously. I was polite when they asked questions. "Oh, I'm just updating a few places I own," I said with a smile. Trying to make the neighborhood feel fresh again. No one pushed back. No one knew the full picture yet. Not until the signs went up. Custom signage with my LLC's logo. My initials in sleek, bold lettering, planted firmly on every lawn of every property I owned. The slogan below it read, "This neighborhood deserves better." And my brother finally understood. He confronted me on a Saturday afternoon while I was supervising exterior work on one of the corner properties. "You're doing this to punish us," he said. "Is that what this is?" I didn't look away from the clipboard in my hand. "I'm doing what I always wanted to do. Build something of my own." He scoffed. "You're making a spectacle." I turned to him, calm. "You declared me unfit to live alone. You filed for guardianship. You took over my house. And now you're worried about a little construction." He stepped closer. "You're ruining the neighborhood." I laughed softly. "No. I'm improving it. You'd be surprised how many families are already inquiring about rentals. Professionals. Retirees. Young couples. It's amazing what happens when you invest in the right places." He didn't say anything. Because he knew. 4 years, I had been the quiet one. The helper. The problem solver. The one they leaned on when things went wrong. And when I had my bad spell, my single week of darkness, they'd seen it as weakness. A chance to take control. They didn't count on me getting back up. And they definitely didn't expect me to rise higher than they'd ever reached. 3 months passed. My projects moved forward quickly. One house was already fully remodeled. Another was halfway done, set to become a high-end rental. I hired a property manager and signed a landscaping contract to keep all the lawns uniform and pristine. And I didn't stop there. I started hosting open houses on weekends, carefully staged and fully catered. The signs were elegant. The staff professional. People started showing up in droves. One Saturday morning, my sister-in-law stormed over mid-tour, arms crossed. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "You're turning this place into a circus." I smiled and gestured toward the line of cars parked along the curb. "That circus is worth almost $900,000 in assets. And it's growing. You're tearing the community apart." "No," I said, still smiling. "I'm redefining it." Word spread fast. The neighbors who once whispered about my episode, now whispered about my portfolio. The same ones who said I needed watching now watched me with a strange mix of curiosity and respect. The man they labeled unstable was now their landlord, their renovator, their silent benefactor. And my family. They couldn't move without seeing signs of my presence. My initials on fences. My contractors on their sidewalks. My decisions shaping the landscape of their lives. They started trying to reclaim the narrative. My mother called and left a voicemail. "Maybe we were too harsh. We just want to talk." I didn't call back. My brother sent a text. "Can we meet? Clear the air." I left it unread. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclamation. About proving, to them, to the world, and to myself, that I was never broken. I had been wounded, betrayed, discarded, but never broken. And now, I had built something unbreakable. Then came the neighborhood association vote. A few remaining board members had pushed for a bylaw amendment to limit how many properties a single owner could have in the district. A thinly veiled attempt at halting my expansion. They didn't know I'd already spoken to half the board members privately. They didn't know that the treasurer of the board was now renting one of my renovated homes at a discounted rate. The vote failed, by a landslide. I sat quietly in the back of the meeting room as my brother and a few of his allies pushed for reconsideration. One man stood and said, "Honestly, she's done more for this neighborhood in 3 months than the last 5 boards combined." Another nodded. "I'd rather have a dozen of her houses than more neglected ones falling apart." I didn't say a word. I just smiled. Later that evening, I walked past my brother's house. He was out front, watering his lawn, the hose twitching slightly in his hand as I passed. He tried to make eye contact. I gave him a polite nod, nothing more. He stood in silence as I turned onto the path leading to the new duplex I was staging that weekend. It had fresh paint, new windows, and a garden that made the old ones look faded. He used to tell me I couldn't handle living alone. Now he lived surrounded by my success. I used to imagine revenge as fire, loud, consuming, furious. But when it finally arrived, it was quiet, ice-cold and deliberate. It began with a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A printed envelope, hand-delivered, addressed to me from the bank managing the trust my family once controlled. Inside was a statement. A full record of transactions made during the guardianship. At first, I skimmed it. But by page 3, I was reading every line. $4,200 to academic prep services. $3,100 to a landscaping company I never hired. $9,700 on home improvements for a property that wasn't mine. Plane tickets. Hotel bookings. Tutoring programs. A custom-built pergola. And all of it, every single charge, filed under my trust. They weren't just planning to sell my house. They had already started spending my future. And they thought I wouldn't notice. I didn't react immediately. That's what they expected. Instead, I gathered everything: bank records, emails, appointment notes, photos of the improvements on their house that I hadn't authorized. I compiled it like a case file. Because that's what it was. A case. Stephanie reviewed everything. "You could sue," she said. "This is textbook breach of fiduciary duty." I nodded slowly. "And if I do, what's the fallout?" "Best case scenario. You win damages, reclaim lost funds, maybe even force them to liquidate assets to repay what they used. Worst case? They settle privately. Either way, they'll be forced to admit they took advantage of you." I looked out the window of my renovated home office. The paint was still fresh. A soft gray. Calming. Professional. "This isn't just about money," I said. "It's about accountability." Stephanie leaned back in her chair. "Then let's hold them accountable." The summons was served 2 weeks later. I didn't warn them. I didn't call. I didn't give them a single hint. They found out the way they deserved to, through the front door in the middle of the day, with a process server standing on their porch holding a manila envelope and asking for my brother by name. I watched from my porch across the street. He opened it, scanned the top page, and turned white. His wife came out, confused. My mother appeared behind them, squinting at the envelope. From where I stood, I could see the words at the top of the document. Petition for civil suit, misuse of funds under court-appointed guardianship. They looked up, saw me, and finally understood. The neighborhood whispered louder than ever after that. People who had once taken my brother's side started pulling away. No one wanted to be associated with financial abuse, especially not in a community built on trust and reputations. Some neighbors came to me privately. "I'm so sorry," one said. "I didn't know what they were doing." Another offered help. "If you need statements about how independent you always were, I'm happy to write one." We never believed those stories they spread. I thanked them but declined. I didn't need testimonials. I had facts. The court date came 6 weeks later. Stephanie laid everything out with brutal clarity. Financial records, guardianship abuse, conflicts of interest, and misuse of funds. My brother's lawyer tried to argue that the expenses were in good faith, that they believed it was all part of supporting my recovery. But the numbers didn't lie. Neither did the emails between him and his wife. One of them read, "She'll never even notice. Just keep it quiet until the trust renews." The judge wasn't impressed. Her ruling was swift. They were to repay all unauthorized expenses within 60 days, or face asset seizure and wage garnishment. She didn't stop there. She issued a formal statement of censure, a legal document stating they had abused their fiduciary role and acted against my best interests while under court-appointed authority. It would follow them if they ever tried to file for guardianship again, over anyone. They didn't just lose money. They lost credibility. After the ruling, my mother called again. This time, I picked up. She didn't speak at first. Just a shaky breath on the line. Finally, she said, "I didn't know it would go this far." I was silent. "I thought we were helping you," she added. "We were scared." "You were scared of losing control," I replied. "So you took mine. I didn't know what your brother was doing with the money." "But you didn't ask either." Another silence. Then, "I miss you. I miss the version of you that didn't treat me like a burden," I said quietly. "The one who hugged me without checking for warning signs." "I never stopped loving you." I believed her. But I also knew love without respect was hollow. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "But I'm not coming back either." And I ended the call. I didn't celebrate the ruling. There was no champagne. No smug parade. Instead, I went to work. I invested the returned funds into a community scholarship through my LLC. I started sponsoring after-school programs for under-resourced kids in the district. I hired interns from the local college to help with business operations and marketing. My houses weren't just rentals, they were launching pads. I gave people a place to land, a place to grow, and word spread. Soon, other developers approached me with offers, partnership deals, merge proposals. I declined most. I didn't build this for profit. I built it to survive. And then I built it to thrive. One afternoon, a woman I didn't recognize stopped by during a property tour. She looked around the freshly staged living room and said, "I used to hear things about you. That you'd lost your mind." I smiled. "I probably did once. But you found something better," she said. "Control." "No," I replied. "Clarity." A month later, a for sale sign went up on my brother's lawn. I stood across the street as movers carried out boxes. No one made eye contact. No one waved goodbye. They didn't have to. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even satisfied. I was free. And I owned the neighborhood they used to rule. I didn't throw a party when they left. No champagne. No farewell. No quiet smirk of satisfaction. Just a cup of coffee in the morning sunlight, sitting on my front porch, watching the moving truck pull away. Their house, my brother's, stood empty for the first time in years. The blinds still drawn. The lawn still green. But the silence around it was new. Final. A for sale sign tilted slightly in the yard, fluttering in the breeze. A week later, I bought it. Not through the LLC. In my name. No hiding. No layers. Just me. It was strange walking into their old house. I had never been past the threshold without feeling like I was under surveillance, being studied. Now I wandered through the rooms freely. I found marks on the walls where the kids had charted their height over the years. A chipped corner of the dining table from where they'd once dropped a heavy dish. And in the upstairs guest room, the one they'd made me live in, there was still a faint dent in the mattress where I used to sleep, night after night, wondering how I had ended up caged in a life I built for other people. It was all still here. But the power was mine now. I renovated that house last. Not out of sentiment. Out of strategy. The final piece in the block. The full circle. I updated the kitchen, painted the walls, refinished the floors, replaced every window. I didn't turn it into a rental. I didn't flip it. I turned it into a wellness center. A place for people who'd been where I was, recovering, rebuilding, misunderstood. I called it The Return. The name meant everything. We opened 6 months after the lawsuit settled. The center offered affordable therapy, peer mentorship, group sessions, and financial counseling. No one knew that the woman quietly sitting at the front desk every Tuesday and Thursday was the same person the neighborhood once whispered about. The unstable one. The liability. They didn't recognize me, because they never really saw me in the first place. Now they saw someone different. Confident. Clear. In control. One afternoon, I ran into my old therapist, the one my family had forced me to see when everything started unraveling. She was at the coffee shop near the community park, holding a to-go cup and glancing at the notice board full of neighborhood flyers. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "I've been hearing your name," she said. "The community center. The rentals. The housing grants." "I've been busy," I replied. She smiled. "You seem grounded." "I've learned," I said, "that it's easier to breathe when no one else is holding your air." She nodded slowly. "What you've built, most people don't come back from something like what happened to you." I shrugged. I didn't come back. I rebuilt from the ashes. The neighborhood changed. And not just on paper. The people changed too. New families moved in. Renters became buyers. Children played on sidewalks that had been empty for years. I walked past houses that used to belong to people who whispered behind my back, and now saw their replacements waving to me in the mornings. Some people knew my story. Some didn't. But it didn't matter. Because the power wasn't in being recognized. The power was in knowing that I didn't need to be. I had nothing left to prove. One evening, well into the second year of owning nearly every property on the block, I sat at the community center watching a woman give her first speech in front of a peer group. She was soft-spoken, nervous. I was told I couldn't make decisions on my own, she said, voice trembling. That I wasn't safe without help. But no one asked what made me feel unsafe in the first place. I felt the air shift around the room. Heads nodding. Eyes glistening. I'm not broken, she continued. I'm just finding my own language again. And just like that, I remembered what it felt like. Those first fragile moments of returning to myself. Of daring to say, this is who I am, even when no one wanted to hear it. She stepped down from the podium. I stood up to greet her. Thank you, she whispered, for creating this space. I smiled. I didn't create it alone. You helped finish building it just now. Years passed. The LLC grew, then folded gently into a non-profit housing trust. I stepped back from the day-to-day operations and moved into consulting. I bought a small lake house an hour outside the city. I traveled for the first time in a decade. I still visited the neighborhood often. Every time I walked those sidewalks, I was reminded of what it took to get there. Not just money or strategy, but patience, clarity, and a refusal to stay small just because someone else said I should. The last time I saw my brother was at a funeral, for a distant cousin. He looked older, tired, worn down by the weight of choices he could never fully take back. We didn't speak much. Just a nod. A brief glance. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt distance. The kind that doesn't hurt anymore. People often ask me why I stayed in the same neighborhood. Why not move somewhere else? Start over somewhere new? I tell them the truth. Because this place tried to erase me. And instead, I carved my name into its foundation. I turned the place of my greatest betrayal into a monument of resilience. My family said I wasn't fit to live alone. Now I own the streets they tried to exile me from.